It's, people say it's an honor to be here, and it's a cliche, it's a good one, but it's very often true. And I'm privileged to be here because I'm representing each of you who is in the trenches at this point in your lives and your careers. And very often you're doing precisely what we saw here a few moments ago. This is the real work. And you're doing it. And you're doing it in increasing numbers. And I want to say this in case I forget. In this room, we know. In your system of schools, you know. But do you know the world doesn't know about this yet? And I do a lot of work with Smithsonian as a professor on tours. It's a great gig. You get it when you're old enough, okay? And I'm with some pretty impressive people who can afford these tours, sometimes lots of them every year, okay? And they've done wonderful things. And I'm a little careful about how I get into this topic. You understand that, right? But they have no idea. They think I'm making it up, talking about education on Neptune, maybe. So one thing I want to say is, before I get into the formal part, is think of ways to help other people know what you're doing, what your children are doing, what your kids are doing, what the parents are doing. Because it is news. It's big, flaming news. And if you look back, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, this would have been a dream of the very people that are making this happen now. And that right now means you. So my hat that I'm not wearing is off to you. I want to start with, not that we need waking up, but just in case, a bit of music. This is the opening toccata from Monteverdi's 1607 opera, Orfeo, which is considered the cradle, not even the cradle, it's the first explosion after about a 10-year period of experimentation in what would begin to be called eventually, after 4 or 5 decades, opera. But it's still in the repertoire. And of the 5 that Monteverdi wrote in the second half of his career, 2 of the 5 are still very much in modern repertoire, produced all over the world in all kinds of crazy configurations on motorcycles, dropping down from the ceiling, as all kinds of modern directors like to do with Baroque works. But nonetheless, it doesn't matter because it works so well. This is a toccata. This is a wonderful production. Let's see if we can hear it. You'll hear a very simple strain repeated 3 times. And if we played it about 6 times, I can promise you it would never leave your mind or your heart. Immediately, that is followed by a lovely string, pastoral, late Renaissance intermezzo kind of, and then in this work, out comes the first recitative, the singer of the first recitative, who is La Musica. And recitative was the great invention right around 1600, starting in Florence. Lots of people were wanting to revive the Greek drama, but they didn't really know exactly what that meant. They had the architecture, they had the play scripts, they had descriptions, but they didn't know what the music was. It's taken a long time. There's not much really, legacy-wise, to know, as much as people have worked to recreate it. So they came up with something that made perfect sense from a Western tonal vocabulary, which is we simply will intone the words and recite them. And while, I think this works. While, no? Does it, can you hear me? Yeah. While I'm not La Musica and I'm not the soprano or the countertenor who would come out and sing this, it's a simple process. I think I'll put it lip. And it's in Io la musica son chi na dolce accenti can make peaceful so far every troubled heart. Okay. And so with noble anger and so with love can I inflame the coldest minds. Something that can inflame the coldest minds. She actually starts with some wonderful Greek. She actually, that's good. I haven't fallen down yet, it's very good. She actually starts with something more erudite in that speech. Actually, I'll show you the words from my, because it's Greek tragedy, right? So you have to. The Orpheus myth, but then after that you have a madrigal coming out in the pastoral dances and all that, and then they find out that the poor gal's been bitten by the snake, and off he goes, and he's very upset, and you know the story. The Orpheus story became key to the development of a great deal of Western art, not just music, not just visual art, it's not just theater, it's the explosion again. At the perfect time, leading to something that 60 years later we would no longer call favola per musica, a fable in music, or an azione, an action in music, or a drama per musica, but an opera, a work per musica, and then opera becomes opera, but not quite yet opry, because that's, grand old. But, it's the same word. It means work. We know that. And eventually by, the 1660s, we've got a genre that will stay the most important genre until film gets talking capacity, and suddenly you got Al Jolson able to sing on screen, and within a few years, opera is no longer the focus of everything, really, especially star power and money and society and all that it meant. It's very hard for us 100 years later to know what that sweep of theater through the sung word meant in our Western tradition. And of course, it's very much not present in most young people's lives. But I'm not up here to tell everybody what we need in life is more opera, although we do. I'm wanting to point out that, and my whole purpose is to remind you of what you already know. We have the real stuff in the arts. We have the direct line. You can take Orfeo. You go back to the mythology. You look at all the manifestations. The Poliana, which is a intoned tragedy that was sung in a static form like an art song in the late 15th century. We have many musical precedents before those guys in Florence came up with the ideas that led Monteverdi to say, I'm going to try this myself and see what happens. Eurydice by Peri and Caccini, two different musical renditions with Rinuccini's libretto. All of these people were the top cultured figures of their day. They were the court poets. They were the people that were classical education, as we might say, embodied. And then Monteverdi comes along, and off it goes, and off it goes, and off it goes. The phrase, prima le parole, dopo, a dopo la musica, although it's often a poi la musica, but I like dopo because it's just nice, First the word and then the music is a supercharged phrase. If you look it up, it goes back to the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. But it goes back to a kind of a curious little opera that was done by Salieri. You remember Amadeus, the amazing film, What an Education? Make sure if you show it to students, you get the first version, because they put some scenes back in the second version that I wasn't expecting one day. And boy, was I surprised, and boy, were they surprised. So be careful. First version, 1980, if I'm not, the Milos Forman shot in Prague after he had been expelled. You want a story? Follow the story of that film and this phenomenal filmmaker going back to Prague in the very place where he had been after the 1968 revolutions pushed out. And of course he comes home to us in the United States and all over the world. He lives and makes all these amazing films and changes filmmaking and blah, 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 blah. And goes back, and Prague is, even under communism, open to him to do what he does, right? But at any rate, that film was shot in the place Prague that was able to recreate best the look of the 18th century of Mozart's life. Plus Mozart was in Prague. Plus Mozart, Don Giovanni premiered in Prague, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was a perfect thing. It's a perfect tool to help teach that world. But at any rate, the Salieri figure, who's fabulous, right? Salieri was the court composer, and he wrote all of these pieces, and he wrote a divertimento for Joseph II under instruction for the Orangerie at Schönbrunn, so you know it wasn't terribly serious. It was meant to be fun. And it was Prima le parole e poi la musica. And it was a little spoof on which was more important, the word or the music. The word or the music. And that battle's been going on. 1942, Richard Strauss, Capriccio, right at the height of the war, which is a glorious work, his last transcendental opera, transcendental piece, almost, not his last piece, but last theater piece, where they sit around and talk about the word and the music and have a marvelous time while they do it. So you can look at those, but the argument exceeds anything that's in any piece of music or in any discussion, in any parlor or any essay. And the answer is, quite frankly, the word, because the word has spurred everything else that we have, do, and love. Now, I want to show you something else, because the word is ancient, and in a lot of cultures, it has not been forgotten. We've chopped our trees off at the root in this culture, and you know that. But not everywhere has that happened. And we can learn a lot from the places, both in Western culture and non-Western culture, or global culture, whatever the right phrase is now, of where people are still connected the way you're working to connect, reconnect, rebuild, strengthen the connections. This is a fairly pagan, of course, nice ancient Latvian folk song, which the word you'll hear is ligo, which means sway. And it really is a goddess of darkness and the reeds, and who knows what it means, because, who knows what all these things mean. Just quite beautiful. A golden reed, I reach my destination, dozens of young girls' wreaths, goddess of darkness and fog, raise your cap so that dear Mara knows how to heal my reed. Folk songs, right? That's one of the grand things about folk songs, too. They are not neutral. But I'd like you to hear it done like this. it goes a long time. They're not in a hurry. That's 15,000 singers, and I don't know how many are in that audience, but more than that. And what you're seeing is a tradition that is very common in Eastern Europe, in the Baltic countries, as we call Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Scandinavia. Those festivals in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia are held every 5 years in staggered form. They're called the Song Fests. Every chorus, now these are tiny countries, okay? But every little town has a chorus, and there's nothing wimpy or silly about being in it. It's like being connected. And they all compete. They get the music, I don't know, 2 years in advance what it's going to be, and it's not easy. But they've been doing this for centuries. So they know. They come up hearing this, and then they compete to see which can get into that number of 15,000. A whole lot don't make it. And then they come, and they have days, I think it's a whole week in Tallinn, and they're there, and there's similar festivals with folk dancing that are equally impressive. I don't know, 15,000 dancers at a time, that'd be something, wouldn't it? What you are seeing is something that we can't do anymore. And you could say, well, they're all in one little place, and, you know, well, but look at all the costumes you saw. They would not see themselves as a homogenous group in many ways. What they see themselves is a group that is still connected to le parole, to the word. And it is that connection that gets you through the tough times of life, which have always been there, from which we here in this place, this continent, have been more or less shielded. It was these song fests that helped people survive the 70 years of Soviet chaos and destruction. And, you know, you got to sing these songs after you sang the Stalin songs, the Lenin songs, everything. If you find this interesting, and especially for middle schoolers and, well, anybody, really, you will find this film quite helpful, I think. It's called The Singing Revolution. Some of you may have seen it. It charts the history of the Estonian Songfest. It has lots of film footage from the Soviet period. It talks and shows you how the one folk song that was the national song of the Estonians, the one that brought, like, America the Beautiful might have done, right, which was not going to be allowed, of course. Nonetheless, if you have 10, 15,000 singers, how do you stop them once they start it? You really can't knock them all off the stage. And since it's outdoors, you can't even turn on the lights and off the lights. They're going to sing it. The director will pay the price later. Song, story, legend, lore, folk decor, folk dance, every bit of that, which was sucked up by every classical artist from Beethoven and Brahms, and you name any painter who is not connected in some point to the traditions, the visual traditions around, and every bit of dance choreography and every bit of theater. This used to matter in our culture a lot, too. And then we decided it only was for children, and then we decided it wasn't worth our time. We decided a lot of things weren't worth our time. And this is a group that doesn't accept that anymore, particularly this year with the focus on the Symposium. We have spent enough time in the wings being polite about the fine arts. Okay. This is the right time. We don't need to knock everybody down, and we don't, because we are they. They just don't know it yet. And what we heard last night, I felt like a little child last night. And I found myself thinking, I wish just hordes of people could experience what we heard last night, who have no idea. Again, they have no idea about these connections. Or they're scared to admit they might be there, or it undoes the model to know that they might be there, or on and on, or nobody taught them. If you're hardly at all old, you didn't get taught at all this. I'm a kid of the 50s. Roanoke, Virginia, it was still pretty good education at that point. We had folk dancing, I don't know, every Friday. The boys dreaded it, the girls loved it, But the boys actually loved it when we put we had theater. Okay, it was terrible, but I thought it was great. We had our songbook. Some of you are of my generation, perhaps out there, not many, but some. And we opened that old songbook up, and we sang these songs. We didn't know why. You don't have to know why as a child. So it doesn't matter why. We know why. And if we take direction from them, we're never going to get out of, pardon me, Disney songs. So we had that, and we had mythology, and we had Latin starting in 7th grade, which I know is late, but hey, at least we had it in Roanoke, Virginia. Pretty shocking, isn't it? But I was the last generation that got it. And it's my generation that kicked it out the door, for which I apologize to you. And I apologize for a whole lot of other things my generation did that has now landed directly in your laps. And you get to walk on the eggshells and figure out how to heal it. I have no doubt you will, though, because we must. Meanwhile, let us remind ourselves of one of the people we turn to so often, C.S. Lewis, who said, "The task of the modern educator is not to cut down jungles, but to irrigate deserts." And since we're sitting in is this right, an irrigated desert right now? It works apparently, right? What does that mean with our children when we irrigate the desert? It means exactly what we just saw this morning, and it means exactly what those drawings are. It means exactly the way children play, and we give them the silly material, and we hand them the ruler to be, the yardstick so that they can have the sword, and we buy more tape, and we never have tape ourselves. And it means that, yes, they've lost every marker top, and so you yell at them, and then you buy more markers, right? Because I'm not getting you any more markers, and then you go buy more markers. Because you have, the men don't always know about this, right? Well, don't buy them any more markers, but then they won't have markers, So we do all that, and then and everybody, we know, and across the plains, if you will, the little pictures they do in 1st grade in K, they're on the refrigerator doors, and then what happens? They hit the important time of life, and it becomes a frill and an elective. And if you tell me that our Western cultural heritage is a frill and an elective, I'm going to meet you in the alley, And you'll come with me, won't you? But we've had to do that. And at one point, it didn't matter. It was okay. But it's not okay anymore. So what does it mean, again, to irrigate? Oh, that's me up there. Is it supposed to be me now? Oh, it's me and that. Oh, good. Oh, I see what they're doing. I'm catching on. Okay. I'm not usually in such a fancy setting. John Paul II, one of my heroes, to say the least. And if you can go to Poland, please go to Poland. And if you can follow these many tours, we do a lot of that with Smithsonian, a lot of people do it. He wrote, "Even beyond its typical religious expressions, true art has a close affinity with the world of faith, so that even in situations where culture and the church are far apart, art remains a kind of bridge to religious experience. Insofar as it seeks the beautiful fruit of an imagination which rises above the everyday, art is, by its nature, a kind of appeal to the mystery. Even when they explore the darkest depths of the soul or the most unsettling aspects of evil, artists give voice, in a way, to the universal desire for redemption." John Paul in 1999 wrote a letter to artists. He was himself an actor, you know that. He was a theater guy. If a lot of things hadn't happened, he'd have stayed a theater guy. And if you haven't seen that letter, it's glorious. A letter to artists, 1999. One of the struggles we have in teaching the arts, whether it's sculpture or painting or dramatic theater or music, is that a lot of art is about the darkest depths of the soul or the most unsettling aspects of evil. This gets difficult with parents. It's the old, people come up to us when we're at conferences, or do your in your courses like in Discovering Music or Early Sacred Music, does everybody have their clothes on, you know? I mean, that's an issue because people don't know. I mean, and it's a delicate issue, and yes, they do, by the way. You know, we've moved many an image down a little bit and blown a few things up, and you can put text over things. But the point is, art is for grown-ups. We train children in art, but it's for grown-ups, and we have to make that bridge, and we can talk about how you do that, and you can talk to parents about how you do that, and you can make all of that work all kinds of ways and not kick the art out in the gutter, okay? Because that's not what it's ever about. Well, sometimes it is, actually, when you think about it. But moving past that, we have to get better at helping answer that question, because what people know of modern art scares them. What they know of modern almost everything scares them when they're raising their children. And that's the place we need to get a more united front of how to help people get past the darkness. And we have to remind them that there was a reason that the Expressionist art, which is my favorite period of art, I have to tell you, in the Western canon, Nolde and all of those, there's a reason why it's dark and scary, because artists have their ears to the ground. I am not a creative artist. I don't paint, I don't compose, I don't, you know, but they do, and they hear what we don't. And we may not like how they hear it. They heard and saw World War I before anybody did, and they painted it. And then came in the trench warfare and the chemical warfare and the air warfare, tanks. They're funny when we look at them, we go, that's a tank? That was a tank. And the battlefield left the battlefield and came into the village. And they painted it first. And the composers put it into string quartets first. And that's why we need to listen to artists. And we need to listen wisely to artists. And when we don't hear them, we don't actually know at least some of what is going on around us. Art gives us that connection. Art gives us the means. Art puts us into the roots. It waters the roots. It is the trunk of the tree. It is what everybody needs to do better, whatever they do. You know, we have science on our side now. We've got all these GOD things, I don't know what they're called, that they can put in people's brains. And they can see that when they hear music or poetry or play an instrument, their brains work better. This is great. We can stick it out on some kind of paper. We have the fields of art therapy, drama therapy, music therapy, which breaks the bounds of Alzheimer's and dementia. People who have been shut to themselves for months suddenly sing a love song from their teenage years. They can't speak a word, but they can sing a Cole Porter song. How do you explain that? That's a pretty big, powerful thing we've got here. We should be handling it carefully. It's that powerful. This is from Brothers Karamazov. Alyosha speaks. He's defending children, as he often does in that novel, as a great lover of children. Dostoevsky was a great lover of children. And he talks about grown-up people going to the theater, all the heroes that we see. But young people's games of soldiers or robbers in the playtime are also art in its first stages. I like that so much. You know, they spring from the growing artistic instincts of the young, that grow until someone tells them, you're wasting too much paper. Well, they probably are, but it's okay. And please stop singing in the back seat. Or it's often the fourth grade I've found. When someone tells them, you're out of tune, you shouldn't be in the choir, you can't sing, you can't dance, you can't. We all know how it happens. I refer back to the work I do. I cannot tell you, if I had a nickel for, probably has to be $1 now. If I had $1 for, every time I've sat around one of these dinner tables with the people on these tours, again, accomplished people, like they have hotel chains, okay? You know? And they'll start talking with almost tears in their eyes about what happened when they got asked not to sing in choir but made the librarian. Well, I guess I couldn't hold a pitch. How do you know? Almost, if you can speak, you can sing. If you can speak, you can sing. I didn't say how well you'd sing. You're not going to be Anna Netrebko, okay? You're not going to be, you know, but if you can speak, you can sing. We're terrified of singing in this country. It's another reason we can't do what we just saw. Our great-grandparents weren't terrified of singing. They sang on the back porch. They sang when they worked. They sang all the time because singing is what saves your soul. It takes the tired body, the body that is broken. We know this from the spirituals, one of our most precious American art forms that kept people going on the 20-hour workday. People remember the hurt when someone says to them, you can't do your creative view for the world. You can't let that energy out anymore because you've got to do serious things now, or you're not good enough, or you're not. And that's, all that can be fixed, though. Moving on this quote. Sometimes the games of children are much better than performances in the theater. The only difference is that to go there to look at the actors, while in these games, the young people are the actors themselves. But that's only natural. I'll give you one other quote. I like quotes. These people say things. Roger Scruton, the true artist is somebody who doesn't want to shut up about it, but to do something else which provides an intimation of what the thing is that lies beyond the reach of the ordinary understanding. There's a lot of work for us to do. We have everything on our side right now. We have a culture that is, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, fairly depraved. When you can go into any place, and I don't want to pick on Walmart, because you can go to any place and see things written on T-shirts that would have caused my mother to lock me up for the next 4 years. People coming in, walking around in kind of pajamas. No, not even that. And it's okay if you live out in the desert, too, of course. But where the language coming out of almost everybody and everything is beyond description. Where no one has time for beauty. No one even knows it's out there, the average person doesn't. They think it went away at some point. They have a nostalgia for it. It's like remembering something lovely you had in childhood, but it's not there to see. There doesn't have to be a choice. You can work with your administrators any way you can. You can work with your boards of directors. I don't know the machinations. I don't know how it will look individually as you work this out. But we have, if we're looking at a quadrivium, music is there, and music implies every art. And I'm sorry, it's there. You can make it want to go away if you wish, but it's not going anywhere. And every step of the education that we in some ways enshrine because of what it gives us, points to the fact that up until very recently, an educated person could do all of these things, plus sing and draw. We could look at our founding fathers and court dance. George Washington was a fabulous social dancer. If you can do social dance, if you can do a gavotte and a gigue, and as Louis XIV knew, then you can run a battle. A faux pas is a false step. It doesn't mean you pick up the wrong fork. It means that you fail at the fairly complex steps that any courtier in Louis's court better be able to do, or he wasn't smart enough for any kind of diplomatic or military position. Dance is where you proved yourself. Dance is where you showed that you were able to think and to be clear and to interact. We've lost all of that. It doesn't have to be a choice. I think about being out where we lived for 10 years after I retired far earlier than I thought from SMU because we bought a ranch. I don't know what we're thinking. You know what hobby ranching is. It's when you spend way too much money doing something you have no business doing. And I learned that. Greatest decade of my life. Bowie, Texas. It was in the news Monday, I believe, the tornado. There's a lot of buoys around. And they say they invented the Bowie knife, but so do the other buoys say they invented the Bowie knife, and who knows, but it's fun. But in these little towns where they play six-man football, I think that's as little, you can have seven-man too, eight-man, but I think six is pretty much it. It's hard to do it with five. It would be absolutely normal. I think of Bill Vaughn, the quarterback that my daughter had the biggest crush on, probably still does, and she's a mother with two kids, but she still remembers him kindly. It happens with us girls, right? Bill Vaughn, halftime, he'd pull off that jersey in his shoulder pads, and he would pick up the sousaphone. or whatever he played, and he'd jump over there with the band. Band had more people than the football team, and they did better, really, and play the halftime show, which wasn't terribly long, and then he would put the horn down, get a Gatorade, and back on the field. This is the classical ideal. We can talk about why we need to do it. I'm only giving you all the reasons you already know, and I'm leaving out another 50 reasons that I ought to have said, except you already know them. Every one of you knows them, or you wouldn't be doing this. You could do anything else. You wouldn't be doing this. But if you get to the bottom line of all of it, it comes to the fact that we have to survive. Our souls have to flourish and survive. And sometimes it's only the art that's going to help us to do that. And I should say this, I'm not speaking as John Paul talked, or at the faith versus art. We'll talk about all of that. There's plenty of time. That gets to be a very different discussion and a very beautiful discussion. But at some point, it comes together. So I'd like us to look as we close, as I close, get ready to close. I have 2 little clips I want to share with you. But we'll set ourselves up with this little song. This is one of the better known kind of basic Ukrainian folk song. I'm not going to go into that politically or any other way. If you want to come chat about that, we can talk individually. This is not something that is not relevant right now. But this song, unfortunately, existed centuries and centuries before, and will exist centuries and centuries afterwards. We are just in what has been called an expanded present when we look at art in the moment. And it goes like this. We won't do the words, but we will do the pitch. Da, 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 da. Thank you one more time because it's sort of pretty. La, 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 la. It's about a willow wood plank where someone is hiding, seeing if her love will come by. When will Natushchitsi bring me my red boots for better work? The willowwood plank by my little bridge. The very melodies that would make a Verdi become a Verdi, that would make a Mahler become a Mahler. The first recording was made last summer. Somebody put it up on YouTube because they had cute kids. That's our new refrigerator, you know. The second one will need no explanation. Filmed a few days ago, as you'll see. This is not a frill. This is not an elective. The arts are not something that we do next week when we don't have testing because we'll have 30 minutes between lunch and the next thing that has to happen. They're not something for talented kids. They're something that we're born in our creation to sing before we can speak, as every baby does. To dance before we can even sit. Put on a Sousa march for an infant and you'll find it out. To act out everything. And to grasp at beauty before our little hands can grab even a soft rattle. It is our open gift from the divine. And we are now at this moment called to make sure everyone we touch knows it. Thank you very much.